Hi folks, so in this video I'm going to show you how to create a drawing like this within SketchUp. I do these in front of my customers and I send them JPEG exports of all these sorts of images on the spot along with an itemized quote. I wanted to show you a finished drawing first so you know what we're going to be aiming at, but I'm going to go back to basics and show you my initial sketch for a new project and draw something like this in front of you. Just before I do that, let me introduce myself. My name is Alistair Johnson at Freebird Interiors, and we specialise in fitted alcove furniture, offering design service and an easy process. You can see exactly what you're getting, and you get a quick design, quick price I should say, and a one-day installation on a project like this. So just before I go to starting from scratch, I'll talk you through what I've done here. This is using SketchUp Pro, and I've also used an extension called Cabinet Sense. When I've prepared these design drawings, I hand them over to Graham in my office, who's our CAD guy. So I'll have done these in front of the customer on the survey visit. He then takes the drawings and just does a little bit of tweaking, maybe checking and correcting, so that he can then output them as drawings for the workshop, showing where the shelves have to be fitted and things like that. So he may have a few slightly different drawings that he prints out, like this one. Now, the great thing about SketchUp using Cabinet Sense is that all the parts in here are drawn automatically to the millimetre, and then they're outputted. So these are all individual components. They can be outputted as a CSV file, which can be opened in CutList, and then can be optimised onto a sheet layout. I can't show you that now because I'm not connected to the internet, but also that happens on the PC and I'm working on the Mac. But there is an export feature that will output all the parts and then can quickly be optimised onto a sheet. Okay, so let me show you one from scratch. Here's a project that I need to price up. I wasn't able to do it in front of the customer. The house is actually a gutted shell, so I just went and measured up. And I know that I'll have to alter the drawings that I do because it hasn't been plastered yet, but I thought I'd just do some initial layouts, partly to show you on this video. So this is a typical survey drawing that I've done by hand. I've got that in front of me, so I'll hide that, but I'll be working from that as I draw in SketchUp. So here's a new drawing. This is a template that I've got set up with the line styles that I like and a floor plane, which is a helpful starting point. I'm going to show you two different ways of drawing walls. The way I always used to do it, using native SketchUp tools. I'm just reading off the drawing here. So I've got my first alcove width, I'm typing that in, you'll see at the bottom right. This is the depth of the chimney breast. And I'm inferencing, which is using the axes. You see how it snaps to colours. That's the y-axis. So this makes sure I'm drawing everything correctly at right angles. That's my second alcove, and then here's a projecting wall between two rooms. I'm actually going to draw the second room with a different method using a tool that comes with the Cabinet Sense plugin. So this is the simple way to do it. I'm just pushing that up now using the push-pull function. I am using keystrokes, so I hit P there to select the push-pull. I'm hitting O here to orbit and H to drag, that's the hand, and I can zoom in and out with two fingers on my Mac touchpad. Now I'm just going to punch in the opening that they've got here. This room's actually going to be renovated into a kitchen, so they're going to have a range in here. And again with push-pull, I'm making that space. Now if you're new to SketchUp, one of the most important first steps to learn is group your geometry. So I've triple clicked that to select all the faces and edges. I'm right clicking or control clicking on a Mac to bring up this menu, and I'm making it a group. That means that it won't stick to the future geometry that I create. If you have a little play with SketchUp, that will start to make sense if you're not already familiar with that. I'm just going to show you the alternative way of doing walls. This is using the Cabinet Sense features. Now some of this, I'm not going to talk about everything you're seeing here, some of it may not make sense. Just have a look at what's possible. and it may just give you the confidence to commit to SketchUp, working towards this kind of thing. So I'm setting the wall height here, which will transfer to the tool. I've done it already, I'd forgotten actually, so that's already set to the right height. So back to the drawing, I'm just choosing different scenes at the top there to flick around. So here's the wall tool. Again, this is a cabinet sense feature. It doesn't come with SketchUp normally, and I'm paying for the cabinet sense extension. So this is just a slightly more direct way of building walls as 3D geometry. And they've got some intelligent programming, so they're sort of joined together as you draw them. So I hit escape and that's done. Now this is accurate to the measurements that I made. Now before I drop in my carcasses and shelves and stuff, what I like to do is add things like wall sockets. So I've pre-drawn a bunch of these things and set them up as components in the way that I want them to be, with some little additional features. So if we can just navigate to the right menu, I'll find those elements. So sockets, plugs and switches, and we've got actually on my survey drawings I've been a little bit vague on these because I knew I'd have to resurvey. So normally I'd measure the exact position of these so I know exactly where they'll land in the cupboard, but this time I'll just plonk them in nice and quick. Right, so there we go. See, they have some programming where they want to align to the face that you're hovering over. So we've got something like, I think there's I don't know, there might be a phone socket there as well. There's a few things on that wall. I can just align that. Oh, that's wanting to snap in a way I don't want it to, but and another one here. So something like that, and I could move them around and position them precisely in relation to the wall if I wanted to. We're actually going to group them together with the walls. I just need to unlock these special walls first. Group them as one just to be sure that they move together. Right click and group. Okay, so we're about ready to drop in the cabinets. Now the way I used to work in front of customers was much like what I've just done, but then I would be modelling in boxes with push-pull. So I'd say, well, okay, maybe your cabinet wants to be about 70 centimetres tall, and I'd just draw a block like that, and then I might just very quickly, say, copy that line, find the centre to indicate some doors, and just start modelling that way, which is fine, and can be quite quick. However, over the years we've refined the process, because I've always had the dream of closing the gap between this design drawing and production. So I wanted to be able to create components at the design stage which were production ready. So you see here we've got some of our pre-drawn components. Now I'm going to drop in, I'll drop in this more elaborate classic one. So what this is really is it's called a component, but it has a lot of subcomponents within it, all of which have dynamic programming, which means they have formulas attached to them, which tells them how big they should be and where they should position themselves. I think my Mac's running extra slow because I'm doing a screen record. So dynamic components is a feature that you get with SketchUp Pro, but not with the free online version. So I've got a little grab handle there that positions this exactly where it should be. And that just happens to be roughly the right size for the alcove. However, I can make it exactly the right size for the alcove by typing in the component options here the measured alcove width, which is 1170 millimeters. So that will now make the carcass snap to that width. And the point of the dynamic programming is that all the parts will resize. So my door gaps will remain at 2 millimeters, my door stiles will remain at 75 millimeters, my strips here will remain at 56, which is the standard. Just to show you that, see that's 56 millimeters. I can just scale this with grab handles, and this will show you. See how normally when you're scaling something, everything's squashing. The circles are becoming ovals, the door stiles are becoming too narrow. If I complete that action and give it a bit of time to think, the dynamic programming will kick in and everything will snap to the correct widths and reorient itself. It doesn't normally take this long. So there you see, that's the principle. So I'll undo that, get it back to the width it should be. Now I will copy that to the other alcove. And unusually both alcoves are the same width, so that makes things a little bit easier for me. Now if this was going to be a classic alcove, like the one I showed you completed earlier, I'd be dropping this extra component in called a classic alcove upper cabinet. I'll show you how that works, but in fact the project is a modern style. Now this one also has a grab handle at the back to locate it. I'm not going to mess around with that too much, just to show you the principle. And something to say as well is that with the cabinet sense walls that I drew on this side of the model, they interact with the cabinet sense components, so the components will drop in at a set distance from the wall, so I can set a rear void and things like that. Right, this is a problem I sometimes have, is they sort of find the wrong wall and want to snap somewhere else that I don't want them to go because they're being a bit too clever, so I can then turn a line off. And that's because we're working with alcoves and the setup doesn't work quite so well because the walls interfere with each other a little bit, which is why I sometimes do still draw just standard geometry like this for the walls. So not wanting to get too hung up on that too long, let me just give you a quick insight into how you can interact with the parts here. So these are all intelligent programmed parts. Now I can copy and manually position things like that. I can take something like a divider and then place it, say if I want to place a divider between those shelves, it's programmed to find the top and bottom of shelves and size itself accordingly. So if you take the bottom left part of that component and drop it into a space, it will size itself to fill that space. You can also go into the programming and tell it a precise position to be. So if you look at this part here, I could tell that I wanted it to be 400 mil. Let's make it slightly different from what it currently is, 500 mil from the bottom. Apply that, and that's where it will stay. And there's similar programming to all these parts. They also have dynamic functions, so the doors, as I think I showed earlier, do actually hinge. And these doors are drawn as five pieces. So when we go to outputting for the cut list, it will output the rails and the stiles and the panel with the correct inset into the groove, which can all be set up. What you can also do with doors is render them in different ways. So if you wanted to put a moulding on the edge or add some beading in the middle, you can set up your door profiles and apply that visually, and it sort of overlays it. So this button up here, I'll just click on that, and now it takes away the joins of the parts and it's applied our standard classic door mitre. And you can have any number of things which you can, with a few clicks, change and apply differently to the door. Now, as I said, with this project, I'm actually having chunky floating shelves, and this is a component that we've created from scratch, whereas the cabinets there, we started with cabinet sense components, but we did, or to be honest, we've done a lot of work to them to make them work by our methods. We've added scribe strips, we've added skirting, we've added the countertop, and we continue to improve them. We've added things like the cable outlet, which you can tell it where it wants to be. These chunky shelves we've built pretty much entirely from scratch, and they are multi-part components. So they include the battens that get fixed to the wall and the different 18mm parts. We've just hidden lines so you don't see the lines, but this is actually a separate part. It snaps back because of the dynamic programming, and as part of that programming it knows that it wants to be cut 20mm longer than what's shown. So that's a function that if you drill into that component and go to the options, it's a function called, it's under the banding settings in Cabinet Sense. You see on the right hand end it knows that it wants to have what's called a Scribe Banding, but it's actually just used as a setting to add something on at the cut list output stage. So this will be outputted 20mm longer, which means I know that I can confidently just drop it in so it looks right in the alcove, but it's actually going to be made longer, so I know that I can trim it to fit on site. Now what I'd typically do is just space these apart, generally 300mm, so I can copy that. So that's Alt click, might be different on the Windows. That's with the move tool, that copies it. Do that once, and then you do X2 or ×2 down the bottom right there, you see, and that repeats the operation twice. This would be a fairly typical setup. And I can simply copy those across. So again, that's M on the keyboard for the move tool, Alt to make the move tool a copy tool, and copy it over there. And I know now these are all ready to output. So straight away, I mean, within a few minutes, this could go to the workshop with the exact sizes as an optimized cut list via the Cut List Plus software, which you could Google. I can't show you that because it's not on the Mac. Google Cut List Plus, and the Cabinet Sense plugin will connect to that. Now with this type of shelving, I generally don't want the classic cupboards, although sometimes people want that. So we've set these cupboards up so most of the options are programmable, and it's become increasingly elaborate, so it sometimes takes me time to find what I'm looking for. But here we go. So look, countertop, I want to change that from classic to modern. I haven't hit apply yet, so look, that's the classic route. Click apply and it will change to a simple modern countertop after a bit of thinking. Sorry about the background noise, by the way. I'm just doing this in a cafe while my daughter's at a stagecoach class. Seemed a good opportunity to do this. Now the other changes I would usually be making to turn this into what we call a modern unit are getting rid of the skirting, if I can find that part. So the skirting options there, I go to none. That will just simply hide that. And the way this is working is it's turning on and off the visibility of parts. That's how these changes are happening. There are other changes that you can make that slightly change the programming and the sizing of the parts as well. Right, so that's hidden. Now typically if we don't have a skirting, we don't have that, what we call the skirting spacer. There's one less part to make. We just have this very simple plinth arrangement, which will update soon. And the final thing would be the doors, which this customer wants to be very minimalist as simple slabs. So I'll just talk that through. What I've actually done is just clicking out of that. I've selected the unit. I've double-clicked the unit to open it. So that's working within the component. You see everything around it has gone grey. And then I can individually select the subcomponents. So I'm selecting the doors Going to component options, that's actually a cabinet sense button up there. You could right click on it and find component options. And I'm going to the style of the door and I'm selecting slab. So that will change it to a simple sheet, which again, once that's done, will be all ready to output. I just need to update this overlay. So that's a slab. And they also want them to be touch to open doors, so I'm going to get rid of the knob. Before I do that, I'll just show you that you can quickly change it to a handle. And you can choose the type of handle and even draw your own, which we haven't yet done. So take that off. Now, for the sake of speed, I'll just copy that over to the other one. And now what I'd normally be doing is creating different viewpoints, which I can immediately export as JPEG. So I'm just going to right click and update this scene up here. And I could, after deleting the guides, I could just go ahead and export that. There's a couple of improvements I could make. There is a setting where I can add that line back in there. The reason that's like that is that we have a 20mm overhang either side, and that overhang's running into the wall. But that is all accounted for, and it does all output correctly. But that's the sort of thing that once I hand this to Graham, he'll check that and he'll set it up right. So I'm able to very quickly produce this kind of drawing and then hand it over. So what I'll be doing is then exporting as a JPEG, so it's export 2D graphic, and I'd choose the folder and export it there. I usually do a few different views for the customer, so I can go to a front-facing view, create a new scene, and start to dimension it. So create a new scene called elevation. Now, some of what I'm doing here, I mean, you can do this in SketchUp, but the ability to quickly create scenes and also to have dimensions that stay private to that scene is something that's created using the Cabinet Sense plugin. So when I say private to the scene, I mean when I go back to perspective now, those dimensions are hidden because they're on a layer that has automatically been created and linked to this scene. We'll just change this to centimeters and less precision because it looks better for the customer. And typical process would be I'd be sitting with the customer and talking this through, and they'd say, we want to put a TV there maybe, and I might have measured the TV, and actually we want it to be a little bit higher than that to account for the TV. So I'd make these changes and they can see in real time the actual measured sizes. And then similarly, really to preempt all the questions, to make sure that I'm walking away from this survey with all the questions answered that the customer might have, I would set up a view like this and create a new scene. And that would just ensure that I know that I've informed them of the depths of the shelves, and they have the opportunity to say, actually I want that deeper, or maybe I want this cabinet to be flush to the alcove, in which case I'd go into the programming and I would type in what I think might be the right depth. And that'll just think a little bit and then pop back. So that's resized, but it's resized forward, so I just need to move it back. So I'd be outputting a JPEG like that. I might move that cable outlet, and then again to preempt questions, we've standardized our pricing so that the internals are unpainted, because we found a lot of customers were quite happy with that. But we want to make sure that that's communicated, so we've actually coloured these parts with wood grain, and that again is something that I would output, showing the dimensions just so the customer understands that with back panel and face frame, etc., the internal dimension is smaller, and we could hide that post if they don't want that post, all that sort of thing. Now, something else we would normally do is show how the socket arrangements are dealt with. Now, we could remount the socket faceplates inside the cabinets, but for this type of project, typically people are quite happy just to have a cutout and less hassle. So we've set up those sockets that you saw me drop in earlier. I've set them up with these hidden lines that pop out. So we just X-ray this view. So we've set them up with an outline, which is how much they should be cut out for access. So it's cut out a little bit more below for the plug wire. So I can see those things poking through the back panel. I can isolate the back panel by double-clicking into it. And then I can snap to where those lines cross. Push-pull to the thickness of the back panel. I'm working in centimetres now. Hide that layer. Turn off my X-ray view. And now the customer can see and understand exactly what's going to be happening here. I can also go ahead and draw the cutout that I'd usually do in this adjustable shelf. Again, so that it's absolutely nailed down how everything's going to be made. And so that when I hand this to Graham, who will then hand it to Brady for manufacture, all the questions that they may have also been preempted. So we're at the stage now where this sort of job, I will walk away from the customer's house in between an hour and two once we've talked, measured, drawn. I've emailed them on the spot and priced it, an hour or two, and I can walk away and it is ready to make with usually no questions from production. So I hand it over to production and then it's packaged up, pre-sprayed and ready for me to fit. Just a few little extras about what you can do with your dynamic components. We've started to create a library of either drawn from scratch or things that we've sort of taken and edited from the dynamic components, the components warehouse. So, for example, this is the one I was looking for. We've got a mantelpiece which is set up in such a way that the insertion point is at the rear back, so it will drop straight into the position where I want it to be. I think I just need to be seeing. Right, it's been a little bit too clever. I'm sure this used to work. Yeah, well, that should just drop in like that. And this again has been programmed with different variables, so I might just get rid of that hearth if there's no hearth and make the overhang different, just to roughly match whatever's there, so I can very quickly mock that up. The other thing that we very often use is a TV, so we created a dynamic TV, all to help the customer really visualize what they're going to get. So I can go into the features of that there, and I would have measured their TV, so I put in their actual measurement, whatever it might be. Maybe there's no stand, maybe it's going to be fitted on a bracket on the wall. So then they see exactly how it is, and they say, oh no, we need to fit that under the shelf. So I can just move these shelves up. And I can go back to my elevation, which has my dimensions on it, and that should have updated, but I made some kind of mistake there with a duplicated shelf. But if I hadn't done that, the dimensions would have moved like this with the correct shelves. Okay, well I think that's about it. So if you're brand new to SketchUp, don't be overwhelmed by all this stuff. Just take it as an encouragement that SketchUp can do a lot down the line, but I would suggest you start with the basics before getting into Cabinet Sense. Get familiar with drawing, with your basic geometry, grouping everything you draw, inferencing things to line them up, start to play with setting up scenes and that sort of thing. If you're pretty advanced already in SketchUp, then do have a good look at Cabinet Sense. And I'm starting to offer training in this kind of thing. I'm not going to make too many promises about that, but down the line, as I try and free up more time for my normal line of work, I'm wanting to do a bit more of that, so do let me know if you're interested in that. I have a feeling I've forgotten something I wanted to say, but I think I've probably said plenty. So I hope that's helpful, and do ask me any questions, and thanks for watching.